refreshing for the purpose of refreshing the issue of communication, it will be help all of us to remind that what are the important issues that is to be looked into while the mediation is to be carried on. As you all know that the mediation, communication is the soul of it. It is the heart and soul of mediation, because without communication, unless and until somebody communicate with another, no mediation can happen. So this is the most important and most integral part of mediation process. So there must be some reasons why we communicate. So communicate, or for the purpose of communicating in mediation process, the very purpose is to express ourselves, so that we can express our feelings, we can express our emotions, we can raise our demands, so that that can be sorted out and the mediator can aptly deal with the issue for the purpose of amicably resolving the same. So if we segregate the communication into various parts, so we can safely say that first there is an origin of thoughts, origin of feelings, origin of desires. Unless those feelings, desires or thoughts arrive at, nobody can go for the next stage. So after the thought or desire or the feelings originates, then it transforms into gesture or words. Once our thoughts, our desires, our feelings are transformed into word and gesture, that is then transformed into message. Unless and until it is transmitted into message, we cannot go further. So first there is a origin of thought, thereafter it is transformed into words or message, words or feelings, or words or gestures. Thereafter it is to be transferred into message. And once the message it has transformed into message, then it has to be transmitted to the another. Unless and until our feelings is transmitted to another, no communication can fructify into a fruitful resolution. So the message is to be transmitted to the receiver. So that once the receiver receives the message, he responds to it by understanding the issue. What is the issue involved in this thing? So that he can understand it, and thereafter it evokes response within the receiver. Once it revokes response within the receiver, then the receiver sends his feelings to the sender. And in this way, the whole cycle completes. So therefore, as we can understand that from the communication, various few important elements are involved. What are those? Those are sender, one is receiver, one is channel, one is encoding, and another is decoding. So we can easily understand what does mean by receiver and sender and channel. Channel is basically the medium. It can be either word or gestures. And after channel comes encoding. Encoding means we are expressing ourselves. And decoding is how we are interpreting the message. For example, an advertisement is going on a TV, on whatever subject. It may be a commodity, it may be some other subject. So when the advertising is run on the TV, the advertising company is basically encoding the message. And it is the viewers who are decoding it and interpreting the advertisement into their own suitable way. So the same process is also involved in mediation as well. So that effective communication can happen, and the parties, the very purpose of mediation can be arrived at. And that is why the communication, at the cost of repetition, I say, that is why I said that the communication is the heart and soul of mediation. Without a communication, no mediation can happen at all. In mediation, probably all of you has by this time has understood that there are various important elements in communication. In communication, there are various elements. And what are those elements? I may just repeat for the purpose of refreshing our memory. First is negotiation, thereafter comes bargaining, thereafter comes negotiation and bargaining is very closely similar to each other. I will differentiate for the better understanding of the subject. So negotiation, bargaining, and impasse. Impasse, probably you have understood by this time how this impasse arises. The first I come to the issue of negotiation. Once the communication starts, the very first page of communication in mediation process is negotiation. Negotiation, that is why we often call negotiation is nothing but the mediator assisted mediation. mediator assisted communication, because it is the mediator who first start the negotiation for the purpose of starting of the mediation. So negotiation is such an element where the mediation takes its shape and the message comes from one side to another. It is basically offer and counter offer. One party makes a one offer and another party gives a counter offer. And mediator is just a assistant, is just a party who facilitate this transmission of message from one party to another. So that is why the negotiation is very first and initial phase of mediation. And most of the cases it is found that during negotiation process itself, the final outcome, even though the bargaining and impasse is another important aspect of communication, but still it is often found, as per the statistics is concerned, that in the process of negotiation only the final outcome of mediation is often determined. What would be the final outcome, whether it will result into success or failure. So that is why making this negotiation, the role of the mediator is very important, so as the participants as well. As we all understand that the mediation is a procedure for amicable settlement, and the role of a mediator is not like a judge, so that he can pass an order which is be binding upon both the parties, unless it is challenge or assail before the higher program. So mediation in the negotiation process, mediation helps us the parties so that the communication gets effectively transmitted from one person to another and finally takes its final step. So there are many other aspects of negotiation as well. It can be collaborative styles, I should say, many styles of negotiation. For example, it can be collaborative, it can be integrative, it can be competitive as well. Sometimes the shape of negotiation often take a figure of competitive, when the one of the parties do not wish to lose his stand, his or her stand, so but the bone of contention is concerned. So in competitive style of negotiation, generally the impasse arises, and that is in most of the cases that kind of style is to be avoided. There are certain procedures to avoid this kind of negotiation. I will discuss, if I get the time, I'll try to discuss this at the later part of my speech or my presentation. So, so the most important, or rather the most effective part of negotiation we often find is the collaborative or the integrative style of negotiation. As we can easily interpret from the word collaborative or integrative, is that where both the parties understand the issue involved in their respective cases. If both the parties properly understand or the underlying causes behind the warring parties, what actually prompted both the parties to come to the court and litigate, then it will help both of them to come to a speedier conclusion and for an amicable settlement. That is why the mediator, we often prefer collaborative or integrative style of negotiation. So negotiation is basically is a procedure where the messages gets to and forth for the purpose of mediation to happen is final step. Thereafter the bargaining. Now we often confuse with the concept of negotiation and bargaining, because at a first brush both the words look similar, negotiation and bargaining, because we also negotiate, sometimes we also bargaining. But there is a finer difference is there. The difference is fine, but a difference is definitely there. We can the differentiate negotiation and bargaining probably in one word. That is in bargaining the issue, the people limit in himself to the issue of one particular issue. Means what should be the price. For example, what should be the price? Whether the price of the object would be 10 rupees or 5 rupees. That is a bargaining. And in negotiation, the object of the parties should be to what is the value of it, not the price. A value of an object can never be a price itself. Price is one of the ingredients of value, but value is a larger concept. What are actually the problem? What is the problem itself? And in problem, there are many aspects which includes cost as well. So the aspect of negotiation is cooperative. But in bargaining, we find that the approach is competitive. People stick to the one issue, and that is the price. Yes, I will take this price only and nothing else. So there becomes the whole approach becomes bargaining. What would be the actual thing? But in negotiation, the mediator of the parties focus on the larger aspect. What is the actual problem and how this larger problem can be resolve. And that is why when there is a the bargaining taking into shape of impasse, the object of mediator should be to deviate the focus, deviate the focus from bargaining to again to the negotiation, so that the parties can shift their focus from bargaining and start again delving into the subject of negotiation, so that other larger issues are also taken on board and people come to a various conclusion if the options are available. So the bargaining is those looks like similar to negotiation, but the difference is already there, as I tried to explain. So in bargaining, there are different kinds of bargaining. If we give a just glance of it, so it will help all of us to understand if the bargaining happens, what kind of bargaining generally happens, so that while targeting the issue of bargaining, we try to overcome it by various approaches, time-tested approaches. There are time-tested barriers and there are time-tested approaches to overcome it as well. So mostly there are three types of bargainings are there in mediation process. First is interest-based bargaining. In interest-based bargaining, the people more focus on their respective interest than the larger issue. In interest-based bargaining, the people generally stick to their own stand and try not to resolve the dispute by deviating from their own stand. So in interest-based bargaining, it is really becomes sometimes difficult for the mediator to resolve the issue, and it sometimes, or I should say in most of the cases, it reaches to the stage of impasse, where the deadlock is created. So the approach of the mediator should not be much to focus on the interest-based mediation, because once the interest-based mediation happens, then the parties is more try to more focus on their particular interest, and the interest can be positional interest, the interest can be right-based interest as well. So this particular aspect of is bargaining is often we try to avoid for the purpose of effective mediation. Another is distributive bargaining. As the term properly describes, distributive bargaining, it generally happens with where a particular figure or particular asset or particular amount of sum of money is involved. So in distributive bargaining, it is found that the mediation process is more easier because a particular figure is taken into shape. For example, a plot of land or a particular sum of money. So where the particular sum of money or particular plot of land is bone of contention, then the parties may be in a position to concede to some of the demands of the other parties, so that he loses some part and gains something, or I should say gains the remaining part of it. So here the people or the litigating party often concede what actually they are going to gain and what actually they are going to lose. And that is why in distributive bargaining, it is very easier, or it is very relatively we find it relatively easier to negotiate and or for bargain for the purpose of effective mediation. Because in right-based mediation, often as I try to explain, in right-based mediation, it can be positional. The party may not lose its particular position, because with that particular position, the emotions, the feelings of the particular party may be involved. And we can fight with in terms of money or in terms of assets, but you often cannot fight with the personal ego or personal feelings, because that cannot be trade-off. No trade-off can happen in respect of one's personal feelings and emotions. And that is more hard to overcome, and the hurdles we face in the case of emotional barriers, we find it more difficult to overcome. But in distributing bargaining, if the particular asset or particular sum or particular immovable or movable assets is involved, we can easily conceive how much in the case of settlement, how much the one party is going to lose and how much one party is about to gain. And therefore the parties would be in a better position to negotiate or thereafter bargain and come to a fruitful settlement. Thereafter, so one is distributive bargaining, one is interest-based bargaining, another is right-based bargaining. Right-based bargaining and interest-based bargaining are mostly similar kind of things. But in right and interest, as we see, in right, the people more limit themselves to a particular right they perceive that they are entitled to, either under law or under facts, and often, more than often, they try not to lose that particular right. So it sometimes becomes difficult to get rid of that particular approach as far as the particular right of a litigant is concerned. There are many issues of bargaining. I am not try to focus upon those because those are mostly theoretical. And at the time of summarizing the whole proceedings today, I should not be much theoretical on the issues of those various kinds of bargaining. So instead of delving upon the issue of various issues of bargaining, I should focus myself on the issue of barriers of bargaining, because more or less we have all understood what exactly the bargaining is, and technically or theoretically there may be, or there are, I should say, various aspects of bargaining. But if we try to understand what are the barriers of bargaining, then probably we would be in a more better position to overcome. As a mediator, we should be in a better position to overcome these barriers, so that we can come out of the barriers of bargaining, and the mediation process concludes in a successful manner. So as per the barriers of bargaining are concerned, those are strategic. There are few elements of barriers, like strategic barriers, like principal and agent barriers. For example, strategic barriers. In strategic barriers, we may get a case where for a matrimonial, for example, in a matrimonial suit, one party has filed a suit for dissolution of marriage, and another party either in a counter as a counter blast, or for a genuine reason has filed a case of dowry harassment, for example. So there is a strategic barrier. Even if the parties agree for a dissolution of marriage, even though the party was contesting initially in court, but even if the parties agree, then here comes the what would be the outcome or fate of that another criminal case that has been filed for dowry harassment. So those are strategic barriers. So strategic barriers can also be overcome if you try to understand the underlying reason behind this. For example, if you try to understand the actual reason behind filing this criminal case, for example, if the party can be made to understand that the reason for filing this maybe the criminal case was to put pressure upon the other party for the purpose of getting the marriage dissolved. If the party understands if that is the underlying cause, then definitely that once the other party is getting ready for giving the divorce, then definitely that party would also be agreed to withdraw the criminal case. So the strategic barriers is there, definitely sometimes it is there. But if we try to find out the actual reason for filing, for the reason behind this strategic barrier, then it can also be overcome by a effective, a competent mediator by understanding the underlying reasons behind this. This is I should say, this is the strategic barrier. Another barrier in bargaining is the principal agent barrier. We should say, that is why I am sure the learned speaker must have focused during the time of training, and that when the mediation start, the mediator should focus on the actual status or authority of the participants. For example, in a commercial dispute, the two parties has come. One is an individual and another is a corporate body. So as per the individual is concerned, for example, that person himself is present during mediation process. But as far as the corporate body is concerned, one official has come. All the officials of the corporate body, we all know, are the agent of the corporate body. But we also similarly know that all the agents may not have the similar or the same power to represent the corporate body. For example, a lower rank official of the corporate body has come, and in the midst of mediation process, when the one party has put a very important proposal for the purpose of settlement, then that particular the official of the company may not be the authorized person to make any comment upon this proposal. For example, he may not be in a position to say whether the corporate body would agree to it or not. So that is why in that case, again, that official has to make a phone call or take authorization from the higher official, so that he can effectively come before the mediator and say whether he would be agree on to not. So that is the principal and agent barrier we often is called. And this can again be overcome if we bring the actual person behind this, means actually the principal, not the agent, who is actually authorized to deal with the issue. For example, the managing director, for example, the chairman. Suppose he is brought onto the board and he is made to participate in the mediation proceeding, then he would be in a position to immediately make an offer or counter offer, and then the mediation can effectively take shape and it can be successfully conclude. So this principal and agent barrier is there, and that can be overcome, as I said, if we try to bring the principal on board and try to take his opinion. Then comes the cognitive or perceptual barrier. This is one of the most important aspects of mediation, because this cognitive or perceptual barrier is mostly found when the dispute is mostly personal in nature, not, for example, criminal, where the parties' relationship are involved. There, the cognitive or perceptual barriers happen. For example, the one party may not agree that the other party is going to get married for the second time, for example. So the party may not be agreeable for the terms of settlement, so that the other party gets free and settle in his life for the second time. So those kind of cognitive or perceptual barriers is very hard to overcome. And we often find this is the most, the hardest part of the barrier in the process of bargaining. Another is endowment effect. In this endowment effect and another is deactive devaluation. Both are closely related. This endowment effect or the devaluation part of barrier, devaluation effect of a bargaining is often found when we see that a particular sum of money or the value of the property is involved. For example, in endowment barriers, a particular property is involved in the suit, and both the parties try to, one of the parties try to overvalue it, and other party will try to undervalue it for the absolute gain, because the party who is trying to get this property back, who will be trying to undervalue it, so that he has to pay the money, he will have to make a lesser amount of money, and the person who is trying to get hold of it, he will try to make it overvalue, so that the amount of money that is going to be paid to him would be as much as possible. And that is why in a few minutes earlier, before my joining, a very valuable discussion was going on between Ms. Yusta and Honorable Justice Iman Ali about the role of a third-party expert. Third-party expert as far as the valuation of a property or valuation of a goods is concerned. So there are different aspects to it. The Honorable Justice was probably perhaps was more classical in this aspect, because yes, since the mediation is a neutral resolution process where the role of the mediator is nothing but a facilitator, so he should not rely upon the third party report. But as far as the with the passage of time, when the mediation is also evolving day by day with a larger number of cases piling up, and mediation is also evolving its shape into more pragmatic, to taking into more pragmatic shape. So the role of mediator has also taken a manifold changes. So in modern days, what we find that while at the time of, for example, endowment effect, when one party is trying to overvalue it and one party is trying to undervalue it, we often call for a third party report, and that is quite justifiable and that is permissible as well. So that the actual, for example, if there is a procedure for government valuation report, if there is a procedure, like in India, at the time of selling and purchasing a property, the registration authority itself has its own mechanism for the purpose of valuing the property, and nobody, neither the seller nor the buyer, can make any comment upon it. Whatever the price is to be valued by the government or the registration authority itself, as far as for the purpose of stamp duty and registration fee, that amount is considered to be the benchmark. So I believe in your countries as well as other countries as well, similar mechanism must be in place. So that kind of report can also can always be placed, so that both the parties can be taken on board for the purpose of determining the actual value of it. So that neither party can none of it can either undervalue it or not the other party can overvalue it. So this is the very important aspect of endowment effect, and that can also be easily overcome. And similarly, the devaluation aspect also. For example, one person is in terms of, for example, monetary settlement. Whatever be the reason, it may be the dispute arising out of accident. It may be dispute arising out of a asset. The dispute may be arising out of a marital dispute. Suppose somebody is making a proposal of 5 lakhs rupees. So the object, or I should say the approach of the mediator would be not like this. Okay, Mr. A is offering you 5 lakhs of rupees. Because if we present this offer in such a manner that Mr. A is offering you 5 lakhs of rupees, immediately the approach of B would be no, 5 lakh rupees is not enough for me. So we should just rephrase it. I am sure that you must have learned by this time about the rephrasing and paraphrasing of mediation. So it is a very, during bargaining also, this rephrasing or paraphrasing takes its shape or takes its very important shape. And we often rephrase it into something like that. Okay, is rupees 5 lakh is enough for you? It's not that the word is coming from Mr. A, as if the mediator makes it himself trying to understand whether this amount is enough for him or not. Because if the mediator plays this offer in this manner, whether this sum of money is enough for him or not, then immediate reflection of the other party would not be to overprice it. Then you would think whether it would be enough for it or not. If for genuine reason it is not enough for him, definitely you try to bargain or maybe make a counter proposal. But if we just pinpoint that this is the offer of Mr. A, this sum of it, we are all human beings, and our human instinct is this: to whenever we bargain, we try to find out what would be the mood on our part. So that part of the devaluation effect can be countered with. So this part of bargaining, probably I could try to explain that these barriers, definitely barriers of bargaining are there, and the barriers can also be overcome if you try to understand the actual reasons, and if we understand the actual reason behind this, that can also be overcome. So as far as the barriers is concerned, I have explained. And then there are various elements of bargaining as well. I am sure the learned speaker must have explained in great detail about the elements of bargaining. For example, try to separate the parties from problem. Don't spend much time on the problem, actual problem. Try to find out the actual reason behind the problem. If you go to the root of the problem, then various options will come. A problem is always there. Problem is there. That is why the parties have come before the court and thereafter to the mediator. If no problem is there, definitely no mediation would have happened. But the thing is this: if you try to find out the problem, then we would limit ourselves to the problem itself. So instead of finding the problem, go to the root of it and try to find the root of the problem. Once we find the root of the problem, we would automatically understand, we would automatically get that the various options are available to us. When the various options are available to us, then it will be more, I should say, beneficial for the mediator as well as the parties as well, for the purpose of choosing which particular options is suitable to him, and one particular option would be suitable to the other. When the options are many, it can be anybody's game, and it can be easily settle the resolution. The resolution can easily be settled. So they separate the parties from the problem, and thereafter be hard on the subject, not on the people. If we try to be hard on the subject, then issues can be effectively resolved. But if you get hard on the people, why you are doing so, why you have done so, why you are sticking on this issue, that won't solve the problem, because that won't, the people would be more, the people get more adamant for the purpose of, for the sake of it, and they would try to be not to shift their focus from problem to the problem solving mechanism. So that is why we should be hard on the subject, not on the people. And as I told earlier, they separate the parties from problem. So if we focus on the problem, not on the parties, then it will be easier to resolve the dispute. Thereafter, focus on the interest than the position. If the interest is focused, because position is mostly limited to one or two, but the interest may be many. If a positional approach is, as I told earlier, positional approach is often is its own inherent hindrances, but interest are not, because position is one aspect of the various interest that may be involved in the dispute. So rely on the objective criteria and create variety of options. That is also important, as I told earlier. And thereafter come the impasse. First negotiation, thereafter bargaining, and there come the impasse. Impasse actually is another important aspect of mediation, where if the negotiation or bargaining is come to a standstill, then the impasse happens. I'm sure, again, the learned speaker must have dealt on the issue of impasse, because I'm not, I should say, not told to make much deliberation on the issues. I'm just wrapping up the subject of communication, so that maybe it would refresh your memory for the purpose of better understanding of it. So in one word, the impasse is deadlock. In one word, we can call impasse is a hindrance. In one word, we can impasse we can call a bottleneck, where the parties come to a standstill position, where neither party is moving from one position to another. Then the impasse is called. And if the impasse is not resolved in a foreseeable future, in a very short period of time, then the mediation will fail. So that is why the impasse is the greatest kind of, I should say, the greatest kind of is a communication where often the communication is fails or comes to a knot. While try to explaining the impasse, I would give you one practical example. While doing one mediation, rather playing as the role of a mediator in a mediation proceeding appointed by the Honorable High Court at Calcutta. So dispute was like two warring parties, that was a married couple. So the lady had filed a suit for nullity because she did not, she was not ready to recognize this marriage, because as per her version, the marriage was the outcome of fraud. Though she married the person, but that was not under the actual within her knowledge. It was by perpetration of fraud, the marriage occurred, and that is why she filed a suit for nullity of marriage. And the boy has filed a suit for restitution of marriage. Means he is trying to, I am not sure whether the concept of restitution of marriage is in your jurisprudence or not, but the concept is this: when one of the parties is willing to get back the other spouse in his life, so that particular suit is filed for the purpose of restitution of conjugal rights. So he has filed for the conjugal rights. So as the terms denotes, the restitution of conjugal rights means he is basically is giving a legal sanctity to his marriage and asking the court so that the direction may be given to the other party to come into his life and reside as a husband and wife. So during mediation, I tried to find out what actually the reason behind filing this suit for nullity and suit for restitution of conjugal rights. So as in mediation proceeding, in one sitting it is not possible. So separate sessions were held. One is several was in a joint session and several was in separate session. But after making all those sessions, it was understood that the marriage has ended for all practical purposes. The girl is not ready to stay with her husband, and the boy is also is not ready to get rid of his wife so easily. So there was a deadlock created. The girl wants the nullity of the marriage, and the boy wants to get back his wife. So there is impasse was created. So the object of the being a mediator, I tried to focus on the actual interest. What would be the interest that would be served upon the parties by sticking to the suit? For example, the boy filed a suit for restitution of conjugal rights. So I tried to make him understand in Indian jurisprudence, even though the decree of restitution of conjugal rights can be passed, but in practical manner that cannot be implemented. The court cannot force a person to stay another person as a husband or as a wife. So I tried to make him understand, even if for argument's sake, if I admit for a second that you would win the case and you would get a decree, but you cannot implement the decree of restitution of conjugal rights, then what would be the purpose of it? You will lose many valuable years from your life. The money is involved, the time is involved. You are a young person, no children is born out of this wedlock for obvious purposes. So why you are sticking to this? So after that, the boy agreed to dissolve the marriage. Now there comes the second impasse. What is the impasse? Suppose the marriage is to be dissolved by a decree of divorce, then the marriage is to be admitted. But the problem is this: the girl has filed a suit for nullity of marriage because he does not recognize the marriage itself. Nullity is a void ab marriage void ab initio. So there also an impasse.
You have no time, but 5 minutes more.
Okay, Mr. Goswami, I'm sorry, I'm exceeding the time. So the impasse was tried to be overcome by way of understanding that if the boy continues with the suit for many more years, then again valuable years from her life would go on. So that is why for the sake of her own interest, it would be easier for her if she agrees for resolution of divorce. So the impasse was created in terms of the respective rights and positional bargaining. But once the underlying cause and once the actual benefit is made to understand both the parties, the impasse was overcome, and finally the parties agreed for the purpose of dissolving the marriage. what is the benefit? Win-wins. Why I am telling this win-win situation like mediation? Because the girl gets rid of the boy by getting a decree of divorce, even though it was a divorce, but at least he gets rid of this boy, because otherwise he could not move on her life. And what the boys get, boy did not get back his wife, but at least by way of dissolution of marriage, the boy get a recognition of her marriage. At least the now marriage is acknowledged, but it is dissolved by mutual divorce. So this is how the impasse is created, and how the impasse can be overcome. So I am sorry for prolonging your training session today for several few minutes. So I hope I try to explain few issues which were involved in the communication. If any of you have any questions, I would welcome it. Otherwise, I would conclude.
Learned friends, any question put to our Debojit sir?
Looks like all participants are very tired after day-long training. So it's all right. I'm available whenever anyone of them feel it convenient to ask any questions. So good evening, good night. I hope all of you remain hale and hearty. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Good evening. Now, can I request His Lordship, Mr. Justice Muhammad Iman Ali, sir, to deliver his concluding speech, today's concluding speech.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Goswami, and thank you everyone who participated in the last 4 days of training. I believe we have learned from very experienced mediators what to do, what not to do, how to conduct the mediation. It's not easy. And of course, things become easier through experience and practical work. Now, if and when we actually involve ourselves in mediation, we will soon get ideas of difficult situations and how to deal with them. It's not possible to foresee all the difficult situations that may arise. The impasse can be anything. As our last speaker said, there were 2 impasses in that case. Now, you have to deal with it when you get there. You cannot foresee what the difficulties will be. And this is something that all of you will gain through experience, through dealing with different types of cases. What we are trying to do is to expose you to the different mediators. We've had mediators from different countries with different perspectives. And as you can see, the example that I gave, we had 2 mediations, one today and one before. And each mediation brought 2 different results, one for 2 lakhs and one for 5 lakhs. But the fact remains that the parties have agreed to take this benefit and less benefit. They have agreed to cut their losses. They've agreed to agree on something less than what they would have otherwise got. But the end result is they are in good relationship and the deal has gone through positively. 2 lakhs or 5 lakhs doesn't matter. If the parties are happy, that's the deal. If it's a deal, it becomes a rule of the court. If it's from the court, it becomes an agreement which is binding on both parties. And best thing is that the development of peace between the parties. Now, it is not possible to teach everyone everything. But you have had exposure in the last 4 days to the laws, you have had exposure to the ways of dealing with mediation. You have had practical exercises given to us by the expert mediators. I hope you will all benefit from all of this, and I hope that it will be of use to you during your career as mediators. And you will certainly develop as time goes on, as you deal with more and more cases. And the bottom line is, mediation is the way forward. We cannot forget that. Thank you all very much for your time and for your efforts. And I wish all of you every success in your life as mediators. And thank you, Mr. Goswami, for providing this opportunity for our judges, for our lawyers, for our mediators, who will be the future of our access to justice, because this is taking the justice delivery system to the doorstep of the parties. Parties will decide their justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all friends, dear friends. Today we close our session. Next Friday, again we join. For that day, welcome. That is day 5. You are always welcome. You are all of welcome for that date. That is day 5. Thank you, all of you. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon and goodbye, and good health to all of you.